Greetings to you all beautiful souls. How are you today? I hope you're doing well. My name is Paula. My author's name is P.B. Moreland, and I'm also considered an aquamarine crystal dragon. And what I want to do today is first just acknowledge the beauty of life. Life is beautiful. Sometimes it sucks. Really, I can use that word because sometimes it's hard to get out of bed. Sometimes you see people doing atrocious things to other people, and you ask yourself, why would they do something like that? But other times, life can be so uplifting and joyous. Hearing a child's laughter, or watching a gentle man help an elderly woman across the street, or vice versa. There's so much dichotomy in our world that if it was all peaceful and love and light and grace, guess what? We'd probably go to a different planet just to find another challenge. That's why we're here. We're not here to be challenged, but we are here to expand. And souls don't expand by sitting still and doing nothing. Souls expand and evolve by walking into challenges with their head held high and their hearts beating strongly and staying positive, open-minded, accepting to others' beliefs, but still holding true to their boundaries by saying, I might not agree with you on how you're handling your life, but it's your life. I tend to do things differently, and so be it. And then you leave. You don't have to stay in an energy that doesn't serve you, because you have an energetic body that surrounds you. You have a physical body, a mental body, an emotional body, an etheric body. And they are all around you in a different dimension, in a different vibration. And within those different vibrations and levels, we'll say, it's filled with energy, and it's also filled with other beings, because we are in a dimension, third dimension, some in fourth and fifth, moving fastly into that. And we could be walking through a crowded mall when we're walking through a field. It is the truth of the matter. There's so many different layers that are what we can see with our eye is only, I don't remember the statistics, but let's say 8% of 100% of the light wave. So we know that. So if I just do the best I can to keep a high vibration as I move about my day, things tend to work out for me. Even though days I go down, 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 but I'm a Scorpio, as I've mentioned in other channels, and I love the swamp. I work around a swamp. I live near swamps, marshes. I have this need to be around things that are growing and living and thriving, and kind of that funky smell. I just love it. And because I am a Scorpio, I tend to go deeper than others without owning that no one else could do it as deep as a Scorpio, but I do. I always have. So for today, I'm going to continue reading out of the book Illuminating Crystal. And what I've done for you on my channel is I have organized my videos for you, because as I've said before, when I meet a reader, or I am introduced to a reader or a TV series, a series of books, I like to go in order. I like to start at the beginning and then move forward through the series. If I start at the middle or the end of a series, I feel like I've missed something. And I don't like that feeling that I've missed something. And that's just my character. People are different. Although when I read directions, honestly, sometimes, and I've changed that behavior because it didn't prove well, I start at the back. I start at the bottom of the list of steps. That's just kind of how my brain is. I will read a magazine from back to front. Interesting. I will start projects. My whole life I've started projects. And got about halfway through and went, I just can't finish it. And then I discovered in my 40s and 50s, maybe, took me a while, that I get bored easily. So when I start something, I'm already finished energetically. Let's say I start a project and I already know how it's going to end because I can see it. I'm a visionary. I don't see creatures and spirits around me. I'm not clairvoyant. But I do have a vision of how I like things done. And if it's taking too long, I get tired of all those steps. However, I do like to read things and watch movies and shows in order. So I have organized my videos into playlists for you. This is in the playlist, I believe it's called Crystal Tales or Dragon Tales. Sorry, but it's following episode 3. This will be episode 6. But if it has the picture of the Illuminating Crystal book, then you know you're in the right room, let's say. However, if you did not watch the previous episode where I started the book, go back and watch that first. I will have that linked to the end of this channel. So I'm going to continue. And as I said, my books are organized into parts, part 1, part 2, and also within each part there are books, book 1 and book 2, and then there are the chapters. So this is the introduction to part 1 of Illuminating Crystal. I've already read the prologue, so if you want to hear the prologue, you can go back and watch the previous episode. She Walks in Beauty is the title of part 1. She walks in beauty like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies, and all that's best of dark and night meet in her aspect and her eyes. Thus mellowed to that tender light, which heaven to gaudy day denies. One shade the more, one ray the less, had half impaired the nameless grace, which waves in every raven tress, or softly lightens o'er her face, where thoughts serenely sweet express how pure, how dear their dwelling place. And on that cheek and o'er that brow, so soft, so calm, yet eloquent, the smiles that win, the tints that glow, but tell of days in goodness spent, a mind at peace with all below, a heart whose love is innocent. This is the poem She Walks in Beauty by Lord Byron. And I just thought that really embraced Crystal's essence when I found this poem. And so I thought I would introduce the whole part 1 with that poem. So excuse me while I take a moment to fix something. Okay, so now we're going to start chapter 1, and as I explained in the previous video, each of my chapters begins with a proverb in every book, and the proverb comes usually from the country or the area that Crystal is visiting. But because this is the very first chapter, and just as a reader you've never met Crystal before, I'm using an Irish proverb, and it's called Need Teaches a Plan. The ice-encrusted snow crunched under the old woman's scuffed and worn boots. The only other sound that broke through the stillness of the night were small pops that came from her old and brittle knees when she crouched down behind a tall spruce tree. Shh, she hissed. The giant black dog at her side halted abruptly. The cold air snapped in the brutal sub-zero temperatures, and her dark eyes, shadowed under a black hood, darted about furtively. The mangy dog's black muzzle was white with frost. Steam billowed out from his snout like dragon's breath. His eyes, a preternatural shade of red, gleamed in the darkness. From behind the large, snow-laden conifer, the old woman peered at the small white house with the tuck-under garage that was all aglow in the light of the winter's full moon. And like all the other houses in the small neighborhood, its windows were dark, and most likely the young family that inhabited the home was long asleep. From the top of the house, a lazy stream of smoke escaped from the chimney and cast a serpentine shadow on the roof as it drifted up into the night sky. The old woman's eyes blazed with intensity as she stared at the house, and with a rag-worn woolen glove she stroked her dog's enormous head. "It's nasty cold out, Cerberus," she whispered casually. "It's not fit for man or beast out tonight. I gather it's 20 below zero," she said with a quick shiver. Won't be long now, though." "What's this?" she hissed, slowly sliding off the hood of her cloak and staring at the small white house with uncertainty. The giant dog at her side shifted uneasily as they watched a translucent beam of blue light stream out through the white house's chimney. It pierced through the night sky like a blade. The snowy white roofs and front yards of the quiet little neighborhood were no longer bathed in the soft white light of the full moon. Now the neighborhood lay quietly under a blanket of blue light. A low and ominous growl rumbled from the huge black dog's chest. "What's this?" the old woman repeated as she narrowed her dark eyes suspiciously. "This isn't supposed to happen, Cerberus." The dog growled in response. Suddenly, a small object shot out through the blue light, an object the old woman had seen before. It sailed into the night sky, and the woman sucked in her breath sharply as it changed into a beautiful white bird. The bird thrust its mighty wings and soared high into the sky. 2 seconds later, the small white house exploded into a million pieces. The old woman quickly crouched down, huddling close to her dog as debris rained down from the sky. Flying glass and wood splinters flew hundreds of feet into the air, and neighboring yards were littered with the home's remains. The tidy little white house exploded so thoroughly that hardly any trace was left where it once stood. Only the tires from the family's car were left steaming on what was left of the garage's concrete floor. The blast shook the little neighborhood. 2 houses next door to the little white house, one home behind it, and one across the street were now ablaze. All along the street, lights flickered on behind windows, and moments later, far off in the distance, sirens blared. The old woman stood and lifted her black hood up and overhead. "Come along, Cerberus," she said, turning to leave. "Our work here is done." The large black dog and the old woman vanished into the night. We're jumping into a next part. You can tell by there's a separation in the text. 17 years later, Minneapolis, Minnesota, November 29th. The tall young woman with the red knit hat and scarf shivered, beginning to fear that she'd never find a job in the dreadful, frozen city whose icy sidewalks were full of dirty, slushy snow. She'd arrived a little less than 2 weeks ago, and for the better part of the week her attempts to find employment had been met with half-assed excuses. And now she was freezing to death. If she didn't get inside fast, she feared her nose or her bloody frickin' toes would fall off. What had possessed her to believe her sister? She wondered as she hurried down the sidewalk. Her sister had insistently begged her to move to the godforsaken city, where the air was so cold that her nose hairs and every other extremity that wasn't covered froze. She couldn't even see clearly, since her glass lenses were perpetually frozen over. For years, her sister had gushed about the city's beautiful lakes and trees, but she'd either forgotten or neglected to mention that Nanook of the frickin' North would most likely find this city a paradise. Her sister had promised that she'd be happy here. Fat bloody chance, she thought, pulling her scarf up over her nose. How could she be happy when she was frozen, jobless, and half-blind? Bollocks. With downcast eyes, the cold girl navigated on numb and frozen feet down the icy sidewalks, mumbling into her tightly woven red wool scarf about missing the hot desert winds of New Mexico. God, she missed the heat and the sun. She swore she'd only seen the sun twice in 10 days. How could anyone live without the sun? And why would anyone want to? As she passed a storefront, she briefly lifted her gaze and shuffled to a stop. She took 2 steps backward and stared. She swore she hadn't seen the purple door when she'd passed by earlier in the day, or the old-fashioned lanterns that cast a warm and inviting glow to those who passed. She blinked back frozen tears at the cold air forced from her eyes and tried to read the sign on the door, but her frosty glasses and her blurry vision made it all but impossible to see. Bollocks, she muttered again, pulling down her scarf. She knew the warm breath that escaped from the top of her scarf, mixed with the chill from the air, had turned her glasses into a foggy mess. But maybe now she could see. She began to make her way up the shop steps to get a better look at the door, but before she took another step, a cold gust of wind blew at her fiercely, and then she heard someone call out her name. Surprised, she looked over her shoulder, but the cold wind swirled around her, picking her up and blowing her the rest of the way up the steps. She gasped as her feet flew over the steps, and she threw up her hands before she was blown into the door. Fortunately for her, it flew open. "Holy Christopher!" she burst out, stumbling through the doorway. She barely missed colliding into an old woman who was stepping through the doorway to leave. The old woman glared and shook her head, and she headed out into the cold. The door closed behind Crystal with a loud slam. The breathless girl stared at the door. She didn't know that the wind could do that to a person. New Mexico winds were fierce, but never like this. Outside, a long, bluish wisp of smoke curled its way up the brick walls of the entryway and wound itself up and into one of the old lanterns. An old man turned his head towards the commotion at the front door, and the book he had been holding fell to the floor with a loud thud. Slowly, without taking his eyes off the girl who had just burst into his shop, he bent over to retrieve the book and watched the girl turn and stare at his door, shaking her head. She unwound her red scarf and removed her bulky mittens, tucking them into her coat pocket. Then she turned her face toward him, and he caught his breath, slowly took a step back to rest a shaky hand on the counter. I am going to stop here. But never fear, I will continue. This is a good place to stop because I want you to consider for just a short time what might have blown her up the steps and who she might be to this being. I'm not sure if this old man, might she be? And wondering if I might tell you right away, or it's something that involves as the story progresses. So with that, I don't think there's anything else I should share with you about this book, other than the fact that I'm just loving going back to read it. There isn't anything more special than revisiting characters that you've lived with basically your entire life, because I know most of these characters in my books are a reflection of an aspect of myself. So with that, I will bid you a very, very good day. And I hope that, as I say, when you go out into the world and go into the store, maybe at the gas station, or to work, just when you pass by someone, smile. Even if you're feeling like you don't really want to smile, a genuine smile. You never know what good you can do to someone, because when you smile and you feel important enough to share something that's special, it lifts your vibration. It lifts it high. And we are now in a time of the planet's ascension, where the higher vibrating that we are, the more we can share with each other how very special this time is. So don't forget to play well together. Be your authentic self. Maybe tonight before sleeping you can ask your higher self or your spirit to show you your inner dragon. We all have one. With that I will say I'll bid you adieu and namaste.